It appeared to be 8 or 9 feet tall, with wings. They were retracted, and they resembled bat wings, only considerably bigger. Additionally, the monster had 2 horns that protruded from its forehead and twisted upwards. Jake was unable to make out any facial details. It had lengthy hands that culminated in slender fingers and sharp claws. The creature's legs were digitigrade with lengthy fingers and claws, like those of a bird or a bat. The eyes were the sole thing that protruded from the darkness. Positioned in front of the face, they are round and red like human faces. They had the cruiser in their line of sight. Jake instructed the others to remain inside as he started to warn the police to be on the lookout. He was yelling and wildly flailing both hands. He was aware that doing this was the worst thing he could possibly have done, but he didn't want to offend any more people. For him, his son and wife were enough. "Be careful, to the left," he shouted, pointing to his right. Already heading in the direction of the automobile was the thing. Both front doors were slammed open, indicating that everyone within saw Jake signaling and the looming danger. The moment the door opened, the dark object took a huge leap and landed next to the car, preventing the driver from exiting. At this point, Jenna grabbed her daughter and ran to the station's rear. She didn't want her to see any of the impending events. "What the F?" The beast grabbed the door and yanked it off like it was nothing, prompting the police officer to yell in terror. A female police rushed out of the car on the passenger side, screamed in fright, and fell on her butt. The driver, her co-worker, managed to get his sidearm out and started shooting. It made no difference because the object was not even flinching when the gunshots passed through it. Given that there was just approximately 6 feet between the shooter and the monster, Jake reasoned that the rounds couldn't have been off target. Jake watched in awe as the black creature grabbed hold of the police officer, dragged him out of the vehicle, and then extended its wings with a horrifying cry. It was an incredible sight. The monster had wings that could spread out for at least 10 yards, if not more. The policeman was still conscious and yelling, but he was unable to stop the winged blackness. It sprang into the air, then increased its height with a powerful wing flap. Then, with each succeeding flap, it moved farther and farther away until it and its victim vanished into the darkness of the night sky. "Come on. Hey, policeman!" The policewoman was still laying on the ground and Jake was attempting to catch her attention. Jake could see terror in her eyes as she turned to face him. Jake approached her and reasoned that perhaps she was shocked. He was accurate. The officer's expression was bewildered and lost. Her eyes exhibited fear. She didn't awaken from her coma until Jake extended his arm and repeated his calls to her. "It's not safe here," he added, "so follow me." She mumbled, all right," as she struggled to form words. He assisted her in entering the station. Jake had to grimace as he opened the front door because a bright beam struck him in the face. "Whoa, what's that?" He spoke while holding up a hand to his face. The woman who was stunned was wearing the other one around her waist. "Sorry," Curtis replied as he fiddled with a flashlight. "It appears that the flashlights are working once more." "Man, what the heck was that? This is awful, I can't believe it." "Neither do I, but I'm not sure what it was. It appeared to be a bat that had just come from hell." "Are we going to make it through this night?" inquired Jenna as she emerged holding Clara's hand and sent a doubtful gaze Jake's way. He simply sighed since he was at a loss for words. He wasn't at all sure whether they would survive after seeing the frightening skills of whatever the winged monster was. He knew in his heart that they cannot flee or attempt to combat this beast. Jake set these ideas aside since he needed to act. His heart shattered as he saw the young child weeping and the expression on her mother's face. In a voice full of desperation, Curtis cried out, "Man, we have to do something." "Yes, I am aware I'm thinking," Jake said. Jenna tried to start a stream of thinking by saying, "All we know so far is that its weakness is light and it can interfere with electronics." "Yo, you're correct. The issue is that we need electronics to have lights because I'm not lighting a bonfire here," said Curtis. "Okay, but how about a generator?" Jenna retorted. "Don't you have a backup generator for when things go wrong?" "I don't know. Like I said, I've been working here for a month, and when I first arrived, they didn't really show me anything." The policewoman replied in a trembling voice, There's a generator." Without saying a word, the others simply stared at her as if she were some kind of extraterrestrial. They almost lost sight of her altogether. She wasn't quite 30, but was still youthful. Her long blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her normally straight features were suddenly distorted by shock and anxiety. She had her head down, her hands on her knees, and her back on the counter as she sat on the floor. Jake apologized carefully and said, "Are you sure, ma'am?" Yes, I'm Sarah, and my brother used to work here, Sarah said. He had disclosed to me that he had once used the generator due to a power outage. And do you have any idea where it may be? Because I'm positive I haven't seen it in this area. Back there, she said. I'm not sure. Check the equipment room. It could be there. I'll check it out, all right, Jake responded. I'll come with you. And he made a hand motion toward the rear. Can you watch the females, please? Jake started, but Sarah cut him off. Of course, yes. I believe I'm now okay. Just leave. The two guys sprinted outside while using torches to guide them. To the back, where they had discovered the overweight guy's body, Curtis was escorting Jake. There were restrooms and a small area for various tools and equipment in this location. They entered a rectangular room that was filthy and disorganized after Curtis struggled a little with the key. They were immediately overcome by the scent of dust and gasoline. Curtis replied, "Let's see what we have here." And Jake joined him in the hunt. They located it after some time. The generator was a compact mobile unit. Although it wasn't exactly what they were looking for and only functioned with gasoline, it was still better than nothing. Curtis stated, "I need to find some gas to fill this baby up, then we'll see if it's working or not." And he started looking for a gas can. "I really hope it's going to work," sighed Jake. Curtis responded, "Yeah, we'll see about that," and he carried on his quest. "Look at this guy. This little one might be used as a searchlight." Jake looked at the thing, which was bigger than a torch and had a lengthy cord attached to it, and he responded, "Yeah, damn right." Their spotlights made erratic flickering motions before going off. The lights turned back on after 3 loud shouts came from the front. The sounds frightened them both, and Curtis dashed towards the door with the swiftness of a panther. Jake responded, "No, remain here and get this thing moving. Lighting will be required as soon as feasible. All right, dude, go," Curtis answered, his hands trembling as he spoke. Jake sprinted to the front to investigate the incident. He nearly yelled himself as he arrived at the door and turned to face the glass wall. A man's upper torso was creeping in his direction, his eyes glued to Jake. Without knowing what to do, Sarah was standing at the doorway. Jenna didn't see these terrible occurrences since she was inside, cuddling her kid. Jake didn't know what to do as the disfigured body crept closer to him. He was the captured police officer, or more precisely the other half of him, and he was easily identifiable by his outfit. His initial instinct was to assist the man, but something told him that this wasn't as things should be. A guy crawling for who knows how far after being severed in two is abnormal. In these circumstances, the shock and blood loss must be severe. He recalled something he had seen when he was younger. He learned from it that he should never experiment with speed restrictions. A young man was racing furiously on his new motorcycle years ago. It was his birthday, so his parents just gave him the bike. The rider lost control of the motorcycle, slammed into the side of a vehicle, then slammed head-on into a pole. His body had been divided in two. For a few seconds, the adrenaline kept the poor guy alive. He made an effort to scurry to his lower body and return it there. All of the patient's internal organs were on the ground as the paramedics hoisted him up. When Jake crawled to retrieve his intestines, he noticed his eyes, and they were unlike the eyes of this man. These were vile and unyielding. When the crawling body spoke in a voice that was nearly feminine, his fears were confirmed. "Why did you allow us to perish?" The others winced at the sound of his weird voice as he talked. Jake took a couple steps backwards with his mouth gaping. He was hearing things that he couldn't believe. "Jake, it's your fault." The body on the ground muttered, "It's all your fault," and then his head hit the ground. He then stopped moving altogether. Jake continued to stare at the body before turning to face Sarah, who was still at the doorway. Her expressions were confused and terrified. She turned to Jake because she was certain he had the answers. At least this is what she deduced from her observation of his expression, which revealed a range of emotions. She waved her hand and yelled, "Hey, come inside." Jake was unable to speak. Old emotions came flooding back to him. The floodgates were now wide open. He was once more hit by that which had been only slowly seeping through freshly repaired fissures, dousing him in a rain of grief. As he fell to the ground, he covered his face with his hands. Sarah rushed up to the sad guy, knelt down by his side, and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Get going. Avoid doing this. You are needed," Jake mumbled, still sporting a blank expression. I murdered them." Sarah said, "You didn't kill anyone," and violently shook him. "Now come inside, will ya?" The guy emerged from his coma and stood up. He was taken back inside the station by Sarah. His legs hardly followed his commands. His thoughts were elsewhere, in a shadowy realm. Sarah and Jenna questioned Jake after she had brought him inside again. "Whoa, what was that?" inquired Jenna. "How on earth is that man still alive?" "I am not sure. No, he wasn't." Jake spoke, sounding more determined than before. "Why do you mean that?" inquired Sarah. "He was inconceivably alive. That flying monster simply performed some cruel trick on us." "What about the voice, you ask?" "I tell you that voice wasn't him." "Whose voice, though?" "Do not suggest to me that this voice has any connection. It has indeed. Nearly it was my wife's voice." Sarah questioned. "Your wife?" with a look of complete perplexity. "Yes, she and my son Clark both passed away 4 years ago." "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, but I don't see how it relates to what's going on this evening," Sarah remarked. Jake remarked, "I don't either, believe me," and then he moved toward the booze aisle. "What's the story then?" inquired Jenna. "The fucked up tale goes that I was married with a son who was 10 years old," Jake said as he cracked open a bottle of Jack and took a sip. "He reminded me a lot of Clara, your daughter." Clara, who had been quiet up until this point but had been always at her mother's side, said, "What happened to him?" "We didn't have a great relationship, you know. So if you get what I mean, I went somewhere to have some fun." "Yes, you betrayed her." "Yes, that's correct," he said, adding that there isn't a single day on the face of the planet when he doesn't regret doing that. He then took another sip from the bottle. "We ultimately had the inevitable disagreements once she found out, after which she filed for divorce. She was given custody after our divorce, but at least I got to visit my son." "And what transpired after that?" "They visited their granny one night. It was a typical night. They were traveling on a rural road that had been abandoned. She was surrounded by a vehicle and was exhausted. She was unable to prevent it. "I swear to God," Sarah said. "I'm sorry. Yes, I agree, every single day." The strange thing is that Clark was discovered in the trees many yards distant with nearly all of his head removed. He was hauled from the crash by an animal. His throat tightened and his voice became shaky. "Just like the first victim's body," Jenna said. Sarah questioned, "Was there a first victim? Whose voice, though? Do not suggest to me that this voice has any connection." "It has indeed. Nearly it was my wife's voice." Sarah questioned, "Your wife?" with a look of complete perplexity. "Yes, she and my son Clark both passed away 4 years ago." "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, but I don't see how it relates to what's going on this evening," Sarah remarked. Jake remarked, "I don't either, believe me," and then he moved toward the booze aisle. "What's the story then?" inquired Jenna. "The fucked up tale goes that I was married with a son who was 10 years old," Jake said as he cracked open a bottle of Jack and took a sip. "He reminded me a lot of Clara, your daughter." Clara, who had been quiet up until this point but had been always at her mother's side, said, "What happened to him?" "We didn't have a great relationship, you know, so if you get what I mean, I went somewhere to have some fun." "Yes, you betrayed her." "Yes, that's correct," he said, adding that there isn't a single day on the face of the planet when he doesn't regret doing that. He then took another sip from the bottle. "We ultimately had the inevitable disagreements once she found out, after which she filed for divorce. She was given custody after our divorce, but at least I got to visit my son." "And what transpired after that?" "They visited their granny one night. It was a typical night. They were traveling on a rural road that had been abandoned. She was surrounded by a vehicle and was exhausted. She was unable to prevent it. I swear to God." Sarah said, "I'm sorry.